So yeah, thank you for having me here. I'd like to.
Can we put the lights down because it's very hard to see?
No, I'm sorry,
no, if you guys
we can't.
Because you guys will be able to see on your screens here. I'd like to second what James Gordon was saying about how surprised he is by this and how appreciative he is of the really great things that are happening in this city. I'd really like to second that. And I hope that none of this is taken as personal by anybody. It's simply about what is written and what is written entails. So the first concern is in Section 12 here, as you guys have heard a lot about so far in the nuisance bylaw. I'm going to skip paraphrasing as you've heard so much about it. But the things I'd like to really focus in on here is, yes, in hers or her controlled discretion, considering the purposes and the best interests of the city, and the idea that you can prohibit and restrict activities that would otherwise be permitted pursuant to this bylaw, and then also if you look at the conditions, they still point toward things that relate to free assembly and expression and stuff like that. So otherwise permitted here and essentially refers to things not covered in this bylaw or any law for that matter, in other words, perfectly legal activities. This quite literally grants unelected officials the power to restrict or prohibit anything at any time with any condition without any council or public approval, which is a complete undermining of democracy to the extent that anything taken out of this bylaw or its previous draft would simply be enacted anyway under the bylaw simply by posting a temporary sign or signs at the entrances to the city. So the next concern is in Section 8H of the bylaw, whereas the weapon restriction still lacks the sensibility of Sections 88 to 90 of the Criminal Code, which already cover the possession of weapons. Although the definition of a weapon of the bylaw has been updated to the definition from the Criminal Code, it still creates a circumstance of an open-ended weapon definition attached to an open-ended restriction. As we can see here in Section 3 of the Criminal Code, there's innate recognition that this definition can still stretch towards things intended or designed for other purposes. Also, by restricting, prohibiting all weapons, I'm not sure, but it might open up a can of worms regarding the sections in the Criminal Code concerned with restricted and prohibited weapons, as they could now apply. If you look at the definitions, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, the only way to overcome either of these two issues in the bylaw would be to have the restriction in the bylaw reiterate the circumstances expressed in the Criminal Code's weapons restrictions. For example, no person may carry a weapon if they are doing so for a purpose dangerous to the public's peace or committing an offense, as defined in the Criminal Code, or while the person might be on their way to a public meeting. Is it responsible to write anything like this at all? If someone's not dangerous, does the public want you to bother them? More so, if a person is dangerous and a committer of a criminal offense, does the public want them to get off on a bylaw infringement? That's a judgment call on your part. It seems hard to suggest the city could save any money while sending thus far unequipped and less trained bylaw officers to deal with things like public brawls and weapon possession. It really seems like your choices here are either to spend a lot more money or endanger the health of your staff. The next concern is in Section 8C regarding fights. The way this is worded is unbelievably broad and ignores various sensible factors of such conflicts, physical or otherwise, such as self-defense or protecting the weak. The unfortunate truth is fighting and conflict are not something the person can always opt out of or not participate in. For example, by standing here, I could be interpreted as participating in a fight that was incited by a threat to apply force to a lot of people. You can say, oh, that's silly, that's not what we mean, but that's the tricky thing about law. One day you won't be here to tell us what you meant, and it'll be what you wrote down that counts. It hopefully has taken me about 4 minutes to concisely express three issues that together comprise about 220 words in a over 3,000 word draft, effectively only 7% of the entire draft, which I would say is definitely riddled with these types of issues. If I was to ask to describe my opinion in one word, I might say sneaky. At the least, I would say ambiguous. A close examination of this bylaw shows it's not written in a way to regulate currently unregulated threats to the public or the public peace, nor can it ease existing criminal laws. What it does do is deregulate government in a few very disturbing ways, provide a cash cow, and any new prohibitions and restrictions it does include actually constitute an attack on the people and on foundational aspects of what we know to be Canadian culture. As there are a great many issues I don't have time to explain here, this sort of dangerous ambiguity is present through the entire document. Section 5 should be considered nothing more than a risky opening for further underhanded and poorly written portions to slip through and it should be recognized that we, the people, cannot afford that risk, and cannot allow this bylaw to pass in any part due to the circumstances surrounding it. If I'm given enough time, which I don't believe I am, I'd really like to end this on a more positive note, like alternatives. But for the lack of time, once again, this is not anything personal. This is just simply why the bylaw can't be passed. This is a Merriam-Webster Student Dictionary definition of fascism, and for every portion in that definition, there are multiple sections in the bylaw attributable to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks.